Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we're taking a look at the best decks to use for tonight's hot location, which is going to be Dream Dimension. So cards here are not revealed until the end of the game. So got a few cool decks to check out for this one. Kind of relevant because Invisible Woman just got buffed recently, which essentially same kind of effect, though a little bit different since it obviously only affects your side, but feels like a fitting time to get this as a hot location. So we're going to take a look at some decks that work well for it. Starting off with Hela. Obviously, Hela is a natural one here, as being able to hide our discard cards, namely MODOK, but also Hellcow, if we don't get MODOK, to make sure we aren't discarding our Hela before it's time to do Hela things. So natural choice for this one. We do have the Invisible Woman here just in case we don't get the Dark Dimensions during one of the games. We can use her as a backup, and I think this deck is positioned fairly well because not a whole ton of Cosmo in the meta right now, so this will definitely take advantage of that. We have big things to discard like Death, Infinite, Giganto, and Magneto, as well as Doom, which lets us go wide a bit, and Captain Marvel, which can sometimes help fix a untimely or misplaced Hela positioning, because she doesn't always put cards where we want them. And then Dracula, another good card here to just discard a big thing from our hand if we aren't able to get the Hela plan going. Sif can get our death out of hand guaranteed, and you could also consider Ghost Rider for this build if you wanted to be a little bit less top end heavy, but have a chance to bring something big like Death back, or if we discard our Hela, maybe bring her back as well. If you're interested in trying something a little bit different with Hela, I have the Safety Blade Special here. A really neat deck brewed by him, and basically the idea with this deck is we are able to do Hela things with the Invisible Woman and obviously Dark Dimension, which makes cards like Ebony Maw and Atuma not have the same downside, so we can get a pretty absurd amount of power in a lane and the opponent generally is not going to expect it. And at the same time, we can use it to set up our Hela with either MODOK or Hellcow. We're going to be floating a bunch with Sunspot, so we get a benefit from that in the Sunspot, and we get a benefit from our Hulk, who basically almost serves as a second Infinite in this deck without such a heavy restriction. So if you're looking for a way to use high Evo but still want to try out the Hela stuff, highly recommend this build from Safety. Really, really cool idea. Next up, if control is a bit more of your thing, I think Sarah is also a solid choice for this location, as we can usually throw priority, so if we're worried about the opponent stacking up some powerful ongoings or just big stuff, we can hit him with that Shang-Chi or Enchantress, or also Killmonger, who is great against all the kitty decks going around, while also having game against all the Sunspots and Nebulas appearing in various decks in the meta right now. We are running Luke Cage just to make things a bit better versus all the high Evo going around. It also makes us easier justifying the Lizard, so we don't have to worry about the downside on Lizard if we have a Luke Cage out, which is nice. Zabu makes our 4-cost tech cards cheaper, which is convenient. Nova for the Killmonger. Hitmonkey goes really nice with Mysterio, and they both pair well with Bishop too. Jeff for flexibility. If you don't have Jeff, you could consider something like Scarlet Witch in this spot, but I like the utility Jeff provides. But yeah, pretty standard Sarah Monkey style of deck. I think there are a few different ways you can go with this one, but this is one I think is pretty solid versus a lot of the high Evo Hulk stuff going around right now. Next up, we have the Iron Patriot deck. Patriot obviously benefits from this location as well, as we can very heavily stack up our Patriot lane, and if we can throw priority, which usually not that hard to do with this style of deck, we will be able to guarantee that our opponent cannot Enchantress our powerful ongoing effects away. I opted to go for a Iron Lad version of the build. However, you could definitely build a more traditional Patriot running Mystique and Ultron at the top end instead of Onslaught and still have a lot of success. You could even keep Onslaught because it's going to be really good with Dark Dimensions, I think. Getting to double up on your Patriot, your Blue Marvel, in this case your Iron Man, just really, really powerful. Doom acts as our go wide, and he has really good synergy with the Lad. Wave is there to ramp out some of our big things, but mainly to keep the kitty decks in control a bit, as well as help counter some of the Sarah decks going around. Debris is our anti-Galactus tech and helps us get no text cards onto the board. Can also be a benefit of locking down an opponent's clogged up lane, which is convenient. Brood is a nice lad high roll, and it gives us stuff to buff with the Patriot. Same thing with Mr. Sinister. Shocker, just because we want a bit more stuff to do in the early game. Obviously the namesake Patriot, buffing up all our stuff, and Wasp just as a nice free thing to play in combination with our 6-drop on the final turn. So Patriot, definitely a solid and I think underrepresented deck right now, and can definitely take advantage of this hot location. Next up, we have a Lockjaw deck. So Thor Lockjaw coming back with a vengeance with the newly released High Evo, giving us another huge thing to pull out of the Lockjaw, or just slam on turn 6 to help close down a second lane. I've liked this deck a lot, posted a video with it recently. We are running a slightly greedier version here. My original version had Sunspot. Right now we're trying Dracula in the spot. This comes down to personal preference. I think there's merit to both depending on how you like to play it. If you find yourself wanting more stuff to throw into the jaw other than just the Wasp and the Hammer and maybe High Evo, then maybe you consider putting Sunspot back in, but this version seems really solid. We have the Thor plan, which we can use Thor, Jane, get the Hammer, throw it away into the Lockjaw. Really solid there. Can combine it with the Odin, who also has good synergy with things like Dr. Doom and Jubilee. Just if you like slamming really big stuff, this is probably the deck for you. A lot of fun, and I think it definitely got a noticeable boost, even though we are only using 2 of the High Evo cards. Hulk just being another huge thing, and Wasp getting us extra value as she goes away into the Lockjaw is really nice. You want to take full advantage of the new Big Bad High Evolutionary. This is another deck you could consider, and it is relatively budget friendly because High Evo is most of the deck here. Other than that, we just have a few pool 3 cards, such as Wasp, who's obviously good with the High Evo stuff. She-Hulk is good with the energy floating theme, and we have Luke Cage to help counter other High Evo decks. You could definitely try different versions of this. Maybe if you don't have Luke Cage, you could consider another tech card. I know Shang-Chi is really good right now, especially when we could float on 5 into playing a She-Hulk and or Abomination alongside it. Seems really good if you don't have all the pool 3 cards here, but if you do, this is a version of High Evo I have liked a lot. You do have to be weary of other people's Luke Cages, but even then, you're just doing a lot of powerful stuffs, playing slightly off curve to enable a really big Hulk to close out the game while putting in pretty decent threats throughout the game. So a little bit more budget friendly if you do have High Evo, and definitely makes use of all the cards, which is always fun. Next up, if you want something that's a bit more reliable but does make use of the cool new card, we can check out a Darkhawk version. So this is kind of the Darkhawk Doom shell, however we make room for High Evo. He's really more of a supporting package in this deck rather than the main thing we're trying to do, but that's kind of convenient because it means we're less soft to some of the tech cards like Luke Cage. So this is a Zabu focused deck. We really want to get Zabu down on 2 if we can, because we have a critical mass of 4-drops in the deck. Shocker actually helps with this because we have so many 4-drops in the deck. A lot of the time, a 4-drop will be our leftmost card, so him reducing that on curve to a 3-cost thing is really, really nice. Acts as kind of like a mini Zabu sometimes, which definitely helps this deck with consistency. Jeff, very flexible card with the locations and moving stuff around at the end of the game. If you don't have him, I would consider maybe Luke Cage as a tech replacement or just another good 2-drop. But this deck definitely wants its 2-drops here. They're pretty important. 3-drop, the only one we're running here is Cyclops. This could also be Debris if you're running into a lot of Galactus. Debris is probably better in this slot. But Cyclops, pretty good on his own, even though we're not floating energy a ton in this deck. We usually do float it enough to get some value out of this, and it's another good thing for the Iron Lad to copy. When it comes to 4-drops, we obviously have our Darkhawk and the packaging cards with Rock Slide and Korg. Iron Lad, because it has a lot of good hits in this deck. Hawk, Rock Slide, and our High Evo cards like the Thing, Cyclops. Thing is just acting as another good 4-drop for Zabu here. Ends up being a 4/9 if the ability does get to hit and there are no Luke Cages about, so that's pretty solid, especially when you reduce it to a 3/9, and it can't get Shang-Chi'd, so that's a bonus. Doom is always going to be good in any Iron Lad deck, but it's particularly good in this one as going wide is really strong, and the lane closure stuff right now is usually using Spider-Man, so Doom can still get in there at the end of the game, which is pretty nice. So if you're looking for a more tempo-focused deck that doesn't go all in on the Evo, but still uses some of the neat cards with it, this is one I would definitely recommend. I've had a lot of success with it. And last but not least, we have Galactus. What are we going to do when opponents are stacking all their stuff up into the Dark Dimensions lane? Well, we'll just blow it up, and then you don't have to worry about it at all. So Galactus actually seems like a pretty good pick for this location. Also for the meta, because there's a lot of high Evo going around, and a lot of the high Evo decks don't really appreciate Galactus very much. So I think he's actually going to get a lot of value out of this location. So definitely, if you're, not trying to lean into it and more trying to counter it, Galactus seems like a good choice. This is just a pretty stock list. Not only do we have the tools to go off with Galactus on turn 5, but we are running things like Wolverine and Nimrod, which do make a turn 6 Galactus possible. So this is definitely more all in on the Galactus plan, if that's the way you want to go with it. You could also consider some of the Destroy versions where you run things like Shuri and Destroyer, but this is the one I would probably run for this location. And there we have it. Those are all our decks for tonight's hot location, Dark Dimension. All the links to the decks will be in the description, so if you want to import any of those, check that out. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.